Hello everybody. Today is 7th October 2024 and today I will represent to you the presentation I gave at the Clintel workshop in Athens in the month of September, namely 19 September. And I only added here one photo that was taken here at the venue. You can see me sitting there in the middle, the guy with the long legs. Okay, so I also have to say to you that this entire presentation was a way how to keep to the phrase of Nassim Taleb, namely, if you see fraud and don't shout fraud, you are fraud. It was about the climate issue, and basically you can see here a set of people like me, let's call us deniers. We're not deniers, we are actually scientists. All the people there were very nice, actually they were still keeping the flame of science alive. No, so let's, today I will talk a little bit longer. That's also why it's nice that I can represent this, because we only had 30 minutes during the presentation, and that was not enough to present all the ideas which I had presented in my slide. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit longer. I'm going to tell you first who I am, why am I talking to you today, and then I will talk about the main subjects, which are basically politics. I will give a science summary where the politics have interfered into science and basically destroyed science. And then about the main topic why I was invited there was because of the kinetics of the atmosphere, namely the transients of this, and why the IPCC is wrong in its analysis. This video of course already exists, but today I will encapsulate it into politics and science. And I will also tell the latest results about feedback in the atmosphere, why the feedback is negative and not positive as they claim all the time. This is all based actually on the book that I've now been finishing, which is called Physics and Philosophy of the Economy. And basically the entire idea is that the economy or society in general is a thermodynamic system. And that's also why you have so much politics going on, why the science has been destroyed, and why the entire idea of climate change exists. That is just a thermodynamics optimum. Now let's start with introducing myself. I have a PhD in physics of the University of Amsterdam in 1994. At that time I was working on paramagnetic centers, so nothing to do with the climate. But this is a way how you can show that you can actually have some scientific qualities. It was all about magnetic resonance of impurities in semiconductors. Then I went to do a postdoc in the University of California at Berkeley, and another one a postdoc in Aarhus University in Denmark. And then the third postdoc was one in the University of the Algarve in Portugal. By that time I switched to electrical measurements of materials, for instance organic LEDs and so on. That resulted in this book which you can see here above me, The Electrical Characterization, which is available in Wiley. But and then after that I got, or actually just before that, I got to become a professor in electronics. So that electronics you can consider a subfield of physics, but it had nothing to do with magnetic resonance of impurities anymore. Now suddenly in the middle, let's say 2005, there was this idea that we had global warming, and that was because of humans. But I grew up that we would get global cooling, and the cause was humans. That was a little bit strange, so I started investigating it, and I came to the book The Myth of Climate Change, which is basically a summary of all the emails that I have been sending to my friends, which by then already called me a denier, me with my stupid ideas. But then in 2010 they made it even worse, because I'm living in Portugal. They started making a financial experiment on all the PIGS countries, if you remember, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, I think, Greece and Spain. So actually by the time halfway the experiment, Greece basically had died and Portugal was on its way to dying, so they stopped the experiment. That time I also started sending mails to people saying that why this is not how it's supposed to be. Printing money, you can just print money out of nothing and out of thin air, which again got me the stigma of being a conspiracy thinker, because of course you cannot print money out of thin air. And then I wrote this book, which you can see here. Let me delete myself here again, which you can see here, Money in Gold We Trust, where I explained how and why they can print money out of thin air. And then I found out that all these things actually are related. They're all got to do with physics and politics, and later about the entropy of the system. Okay, so let's go now talk about politics. This is based on a paper that just came out some months ago, accepted 5th of May 2024, in which I analyze society as a political system, namely that based on the idea that politics is the art of creating or inventing problems for the already known solution. And the solution is, well, we couldn't call it fascism, but we don't like to use the F word. So in the paper I used the wording join, believe, fight. It is basically creating an ideology or a belief. It doesn't actually matter what. It can actually be climatism. Any ism will do. And then people will join around it. The core ideas cannot be examined ever. It is a belief after all. And if you do examine it, you're immediately labeled a denier. But with the joint force, people can actually then start stealing the wealth of others. For instance, other countries, by invading them, by calling them terrorists, or by calling them of the wrong faith, or actually a danger to society or something like this. And this is basically a fascism. Fascism is derived on the word fascio, which just means a bundle. As you can see just above me, the bundle from joining branches to make the entire weapon stronger. And of course also the Italians are known for the modern fascism, which they had the idea very nice. They actually had the motto, which was credere, obbedire and combattere, which means so much as believe, obey and fight, which exactly then covers the join, believe, fight idea. So fascism is JBF. Examples of this fascism is, believe it or not, of course it's socialism because of the National Socialists, which we normally call Nazis. But it is National Socialism. Also the Soviet Communism. It looks like it's contradictory, but it isn't, because it's the two sides of the same coin. Namely, they all believe in something and they want to fight the others with that. Also, religious fundamentalism is in this thing. So it's on the left, it's on the right, it's basically everywhere. Not only the left, the National Socialists, but only the right, which are the religious fundamentalists. But actually also climatism. Climatism is a belief system where you have to join the group and then you can fight the others. So this is then the shouting. If you think this is all nonsense, I will give you here an example, is the Club of Rome. That is the think tank of our Western philosophy. It is actually based on the Malthusian catastrophe, that the resources will, the growing of the society, of the humanity will grow faster than the resources can supply. But here, let's look at their communique, which is called The First Global Revolution, a book from 1980s, if I'm not mistaken. And then they write, in searching for a common enemy against whom we can unite, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention in natural processes, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. So let's translate this to the JBF system, join, believe, fight. I already highlighted the unite and came up with, but as you will see, is that you can translate it like this. In searching for a problem against whom we can have our solution, we came up with the idea, we invented the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, would fit the bill. And it's only through indoctrination that they can be overcome. The real enemy, our belief system, is that humanity itself is evil. So now they make humanity the enemy of humanity, which is of course which we call a godspe. The Club of Rome is a neo-Soviet communist think tank. This is the forerunner of the World Economic Forum and linked to the United Nations, which are all wanting you to believe in their system. They want you to join them and then fight all the others that don't join. It is the idea that with limited resources, therefore we need the communist management of our society, and that is of course is politics. The most famous book before the first global revolution was the limits to growth, and in that they had a model to explain, to give basis to their ideas, the limits to growth. But don't forget that the entire model failed. All predictions were wrong. They were all based on wrong modeling and wrong assumptions. And in fact, now we understand why it is so, because the entire society is a thermodynamic system, and we have an energy theory of value. None of the resources are limited, because as Lavoisier said, that nothing is lost, nothing is gained, none of the resources will ever be lost. The only matters how much energy we should spend on converting them into something useful. Everything failed. Now, to continue, to show you that they were doing actually indoctrination, out of the classic books of Goebbels and the Soviet Union, look at how they write in another of their reports. These are by the IPPR, and they say the task of climate change agencies is not to persuade by rational argument, that is, not by science. Instead, we need to work in a more shrewd and contemporary way, using subtle techniques of engagement. The facts need to be treated as being so taken for granted that they need not to be spoken. So that is, again, you cannot analyze the core belief of the system. You should just believe and join the group, and then you can attack the others. Note very well, science plays no role in the climate discussion. You just have to believe it. Therefore, also, whatever we scientists did there, brilliant as we are there in that Athens workshop, it has no use whatsoever, because no argument can be won by facts or reason or Greek workshop attended by highly intelligent people. It is a fascisto-communist or communisto-fascist doctrine for control of people to thermodynamically strip them of their wealth. Nothing more, nothing less. And they will join, and they will eliminate all the dissidents, all the scientists that do not agree. There will be concentration camps and gulags for people that do not agree. Just so that you know. All classic techniques of propaganda, indoctrination, censorship, intimidation, etc. are used. It is a political issue, nothing more. To show you what happened in the last time this National Socialist ideology was taking root in Germany, listen to this, what one author wrote. The new Nazi commissar wasted no time on the amenities. He immediately announced that Jews would be forbidden to enter university premises and would be dismissed without salary on March 15. This was something that no one had thought possible despite the Nazis' loud anti-Semitism. Then he launched into a tirade of abuse, filth and four-letter words such that had been heard rarely even in the barracks and never before in academia. He pointed his finger at one department chairman after another, said, "You either do what I tell you or we'll put you in a concentration camp." There was a silence. When he finished, everybody waited for the distinguished biochemist physiologist. The great liberal got up, cleared his throat and said, "Very interesting, Mr. Commissar, and in some respect very illuminating. But one point I didn't get too clearly. Will there be more money for research in physiology?" Now, this is exactly the behavior of people in the academic world in 2024. Most people do not care if the climate change is a lie or not, or if all this woke ideology is bad for society. They just want to have food at the table at the end of the month, or to have money at the end of the month for food on the table, and they will do anything they can to make a career in the academic world, even if it means that they have to forfeit any scientific type of research. Most people do not care. They are simply joining because that is the thermodynamic optimum. As another example, we have the sustainability goals of the United Nations. Remember, the United Nations is a communist bulwark, and they will want to have full control over the world. And one of the things is the sustainability goals. I've already given a presentation in Malta last year to show you that the sustainability goals will possibly and probably eradicate humanity, because a system without humans is by definition sustainable, and therefore the entire system will have at its agenda to optimize the system, meaning to not have things that are not sustainable, and therefore to eradicate humanity. And by using artificial intelligence, they will actually, for the decision making, they will actually do that, because we have been feeding the artificial intelligence system by the idea that humans are a sin or a plague to our world. And therefore, well, the AI will say, you wanted it, you got it, I'm going to eradicate humanity from the face of the planet. In capitalism, that's another one. The energy transition is not possible, because if you have a free market, we just use the renewable energies on top of the fossil fuel energies. Why? Because we can. It's as simple as that. Now, here's another thing about the psychology. It's another facet of the entire climate belief system that is not so clear at first, but we should study it from all facets. That's why I call this a holistic approach to the climate problem, because most people, when you listen to them, they are simply implementing the what is called Pascal's wager. Pascal said something like, I believe in God because I have everything to lose by not believing in him and nothing to gain by not believing in him. So this is like in a decision table, game theory decision table, I should say. It is then the optimum. You basically have nothing to lose, and all by believing it. So you will believe in it, because that will give most profit on a thermodynamic approach. You can read this if you want. This is the paper that we wrote about this phenomenon of psychology. People basically implement Pascal's wager. Now let's continue. The climatism belief is violating all the rules of the scientific method. And I will give you some examples here. For instance, they're looking for the proof of the hypothesis, namely climate change, instead of trying to falsify it. They're constantly looking for proof that we have climate change. It is basically it is called affirming the consequent, that you have a theory, let's say, if P, then Q should be observed, and they go look for the events Q. And therefore they see the events and then say, therefore, our hypothesis is true. But that is not how science works, because you have to debunk your own hypothesis as best as possible. They also don't falsify alternative explanations of the data. For instance, Henry's law, as we will see in a moment. They're using a consensus as an argument, also in the funding, which actually I will show you also in a moment. It's also not correct. They're not presenting models with the model details to their peers. For instance, I wrote here Thomas Mann, I meant Michael Mann at Penn State. It is basically the oracle has spoken. Thomas Mann is the German writer. My excuses, that was just a typo. The Bayesian, they take Bayesian adjustments to the model, which is not allowed, because then your new model can explain as good as the old model. So you now have two models that could explain the old data, and you said that you had the only one, so now you already have two. They're also doing cherry picking data, so that is the same as affirming the consequent. They're just looking for the data and throw away all the others that don't agree. They use fudge factors. A fudge factor is an adjustment to the data to make them fit to the theory instead of the other way around, which would be scientific. And then basically by now we have a system that everything that happens in the world is a proof of climate change. And as Friedrich Engels already said, a theory that it can explain everything can explain nothing. I made a summary back then here about this energy and environment, and in energy and environment, and in another journal about analyzing the scientific method. So let's talk here, for instance, about consensus. Now the argument is that if you don't agree with the argument of consensus, then you're not a scientist, because all scientists agree to that the consensus is a good argument in science. So you're a scientist if you agree to a consensus. If not, then you're not a scientist. And voila, all scientists agree that there is climate change. This is how it works. Once again, this paper here on the right side, it shows, it explains how a consensus can be built in a very fast way by our modern peer reviewing system. Basically, if you don't agree to the common belief, then you're eliminated from the scientific pool of referees and so on, and the consensus is rapidly installed. I wrote this paper, and then a couple of months later, I found the exact same reasoning back to the Journal of Nature, if I'm not mistaken. And then that one was accepted. It was basically the same what I wrote here, but the difference was that they found it very good that you could, in this way, get very fast and thus cheap, leading to a consensus. Well, my conclusion was, yes, you can go very fast to a consensus, but the consensus doesn't necessarily represent the truth. It might easily well be a lie. Well, that was basically then is the end of this consensus idea. But still nowadays consensus, as we all know, consensus is not an argument. By consensus, Galileo would have been eliminated, Einstein would have been eliminated, etc., etc. A lot of good scientists would have been eliminated because they were loners. Basically, science is done by loners. Okay, that's enough for politics and psychology and so on. Let's talk a little bit about the science itself. Now let's talk about the signals, the kinetics, the transients. A transient is a parameter in nature as a function of time. You also have spectra, which is in a function of frequency. So let's take a look at these transients and so on. And let's also take a look at correlations and feedback. This is not rocket science, what I'm going to show you here. It's very simple. But anyway, rocket science is rocket technology or rocket engineering. That is also, rocket science is not science, by the way. So let's look here at the climatism that the climatists, they are, or the alarmists as they are normally called, they are not trying to falsify alternative explanations. We all know the data of Mr. Al Gore, in which he showed the two transients of carbon dioxide and temperature, and they are basically in lockstep, so it seems. Well, we already know that correlation is not causation, but still, this is a very convincing argument. You can really see that the temperature is related to carbon dioxide. But then our scientific mind should kick in and say like, well, okay, but might it be so that it's not that the carbon dioxide is the result, is the cause for the temperature changes, but is it the result of the temperature changes? And that is called Henry's law. We should see this as when the oceans warm up, that the gases come out. So you have a very good correlation between the temperature of the system and the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So myself, I don't know, here on the left, you can see that I made the plot then, instead of the plot done by Mr. Al Gore, by putting them separately. I put the correlation between the two. On the horizontal axis I put the temperature, and on the vertical axis I put the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And then the red line is a theoretical line for Henry's law. And this is based on, let me show you here, let me give him some credit, let me remove myself, by Mr. Khalid Al-Anezi and co-workers, which actually did this experiment. So it's an experimental fact showing that the Henry's law actually works very well, and found the correct parameter which exactly explains the data. And in my own greenhouse effect analysis, which is very difficult to do because you cannot do experiments in a laboratory like Mr. Khalid Al-Anezi did. You cannot do this in a laboratory because the atmosphere is an open-ended system and the laboratory is a closed system. Therefore, it's very difficult to estimate the greenhouse effect, but I came to a conclusion here, more or less the blue line. And as you can see, that the red line of Henry's law fit perfectly. So why then would we need an alternative explanation which doesn't even seem to work so well? And mind you again, the blue line, the temperature is a function of the carbon dioxide. And Henry's law, the carbon dioxide is a function of temperature. To be more precise, it is the ratio between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and in the oceans that is governed by Henry's law, not the total carbon dioxide in the system. So the climatists, the alarmists, they just ignore that there is a very good alternative explanation. What they did is they just put the two plots, as you can see here, the Al Gore data. That seems convincing, but is not so convincing. But anyway, if we then zoom in, even in Al Gore's data, as I call it, which is the 800,000 year data from ice core drillings in the permafrost and in Antarctica, if I'm not mistaken. But if you just zoom in, and you can see this on the picture on the right, just one example there is that actually you can see that the carbon dioxide is lagging behind the temperature. Now, that is the one of the laws of David Hume, is that the cause can never be after the effect, which is probably rule number one in physics, that the cause cannot be after the effect. And as we see in the theory of climate change, of the greenhouse effect, we can the CO2 must be the cause for the temperature as the effect. And as we can see, the data, they are not in line with that. And you can see, I think Indermühle determined it. It's about 700 years difference in this entire plot in the range of the 800,000 years. So they're just representing the graphics to hide the fact that actually their own data points to the opposite conclusion. Here also, for instance, we can do signal processing, and we have here a very funny case where we have a correlation between the two, but the cause and effect, they are seem to be also here reversed. What we see here on the plot on the left is that we had there's a warming done. I think it's done by Balling this paper, this plot also. No, the plot I think I made myself, but the data is from Balling, that they found out that which months warmed up more than other months. And you can see here in the open circles, this is where the warming took place. And in the closed circles is where the extra CO2 went. So you can see also here actually that the extra CO2 came from the extra warming, but exactly 3 months after. So there's a delay. There is in the periodic signal, there is a delay of 3 months. Or a 90 degrees phase shift in a periodic signal. And on the right you can see also the temperature system of our paper, which was presented in, let me see what were... I forgot. Sorry, I'm sorry. I forgot where this was published. But there is also, you can see, a delay in the temperature system. For instance, that if you get more sunshine, of course, the atmosphere will warm up. But as we know, the hottest day is exactly 1 month after the longest day. The longest day is with the most sunshine. This longest day is 21st of June, and the hottest day in the Northern Hemisphere is 21st of July. So you can see there's 1 month difference in a delay. But that is caused, that of course, that the entire system has to warm up, and then the relaxation time of warming up the system, based on that there's a delay of 1 month in the periodic signal, that means it is 40 days relaxation time. So people might think like, oh, we add a lot of CO2 and then in the next decades the planet will warm up. No, this should more or less be immediate. A radiative balance is established in a time scale of 40 days and not 40 years. So what you see is what you get with the effect of the carbon dioxide in the greenhouse effect. Let that be noted. Now here's another one. Once again, here we have proof. Here we have an indication that Henry's law can explain actually all the data. On the left you see here a picture taken from our paper about analysis of temporal signals of the climate, which is shown there above me. And you can see here on the left, you can see the picture of the emissions, which are in red. Our fossil fuel burning emissions, how much carbon dioxide we put in the atmosphere, and in blue on the right scale is the year-on-year increase of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But note also that this carbon dioxide is immediately losing a factor 2. We put in 50 gigaton per year, look at the scale on the left, 50 gigaton is the maximum scale on the left, and it's 25 gigaton which actually then appears in the atmosphere. And this seems to be a constant ratio between the two. We're constantly losing 50%. I will come back to this later, but also note that this is much more jagged, the signal of how much carbon dioxide is actually added to the atmosphere. There seems to be much more going on than just our emissions. And if we look carefully, we see the vertical blue dashed blue background vertical lines. This is when the sea surface is cold. We call this a La Nina. And when it is hot, the El Nino is more famous. That is then, you can see that when the sea surface is hot, that a lot of carbon dioxide is coming out. So you can really see that the temperature of the oceans, they have a major impact on the carbon dioxide kinetics. With one small exception, which is the year 1991, and we attribute this to the eruption of Pinatubo. And this idea of Pinatubo now seems to be already circulating in the scientific world as something that is discussed, which makes me very happy. Okay, so let me continue here. Once again, we can just do a signal analysis, and in a signal analysis we can actually simulate it with electronic circuits, which would be, let's say, an electronic analog computer. And you can see there on the left the electronic circuit, which consists of a resistance and a capacitor, an R and a C. That's also why we call this an RC time, because this results in delay. If we apply on the left a signal and on the right we see the result, we can call the delay between them, or actually the relaxation time between them, we call it also in electronics, we call it an RC time. The same for the climate, the same for instance, what I told you, the light, the inbound radiation from the sun, and the temperature of the atmosphere. And as you can see, that if the delay between them, if the relaxation time between them becomes very long, there is going to be a phase shift, a delay between the incoming signal and the outgoing signal, and the output signal. And the maximum, and this is very important, the maximum between the phase shift between the input and the output is 90 degrees. You cannot have this longer. If the delay is if the relaxation time is much longer than the period of oscillation, then the phase shift is 90 degrees. That is also very important for all this signal analysis. Now, the climatists, they are doing, as I told you, they're doing cherry picking. So how, for instance, they just only take the CO2 data. But as we know, also the methane data correlate very well with the temperature. So on the picture here on the left, how can it be? Well, we can understand by the greenhouse effect. We can understand how the temperature depends on is correlated to the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But how, in the greenhouse effect, can the carbon dioxide be correlated to methane in the atmosphere? There seems to be no process, no knowable process for this. But in Henry's law it's very simple, because both gases depend directly on the temperature of the oceans and thus of the temperature of the entire climate system. That is again, we can see that is put in the paper that I wrote, Signal Analysis of the Climate, Correlation, Delay and Feedback of, 2018. So this is something that with cherry picking, they only talk about CO2 and they don't ever talk about methane. They talk about it when they want to say that we get feedback effects, but I will also come back to that later. Now, the cherry picking is also done with the entire correlation data. I put here, let me put myself away again. I show here 4 time ranges on which we can make correlation plots between carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and temperature of the atmosphere. And you can see here the one on the left is the most famous one, the Al Gore data of 800,000 years. I wrote here 600,000, but I think it's 800,000, which can be very well explained by Henry's law and maybe in some way could be explained by greenhouse effect. But then how can it be that if we only look at 60 years, we get a much different correlation coefficient. As you can see, it is 95 millikelvin per ppm parts per million for the Al Gore data. That is the table there below these figures. But for the 60 or for the contemporary data, we get only 10 millikelvin. So how can it be? If the temperature is a function of only CO2, how can it be that for some time ranges it has a correlation of 10 millikelvin and for other ranges is 95 millikelvin? And if we look at the 11,000 year correlation plot, we actually see that there is no correlation, or if you really want and insist, it is actually negative, minus 43 millikelvin per ppm. So that goes completely wrong. And if we look at a very long time scale of 650 million years, that is all the picture all the way on the right, then we see that this correlation is basically absent. But if you really insist, you can see there minus 0.43 millikelvin per ppm. And this is from the paper of 2020, which I wrote, Comprehensive Analytical Study of the Greenhouse Effect of the Atmosphere. So there is something that you cannot explain with the greenhouse effect, because the greenhouse effect, the temperature, is a function of the CO2 and of nothing else, basically. And while in Henry's law, it is only the ratio of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and in the oceans, that is determined by Henry's law, not the total CO2 available in the system. So that would still be able to explain all four plots. Henry's law could explain all four plots, and especially the one in Al Gore's data is very well on that time scale. The carbon seems to be constant, and then you can have a correlation plot that shows Henry's law. Okay, let's continue. Here we see the fudge factors. I've taken this picture from Tony Heller, which has a very nice video blog on YouTube, where he's all the time exposing the fraud that is being taken place by all the alarmists. And here he plotted the adjustment factors on the data. So they're adjusting the data. They call it then some fancy scientific harmonization or something like this, but this data adjustment. No matter how much they want to justify it, it's data adjustment. And basically, if you now plot, this is what Tony Heller did, and then published in, let me put myself back again, then published, I also analyzed it like this. I just took his figure and published it in some strange journal, but it's still there. You can see that actually if you plot the adjustment factor to the data as a function of CO2 in the atmosphere, you get a very nice correlation, meaning that they just basically now, this is very important, they basically now use the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere as a thermometer of the temperature. They adjust their data until the CO2 is an indicator of the temperature, which I hope that you see that this is all fraud. Now here's another one that I always believed that the carbon dioxide, the extra carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, was caused by humans. That seems to be obvious. If we are just emitting huge amounts of CO2 in the atmosphere, of course, then the increase in the atmosphere is caused by us, humans. However, it's already strange that half of the CO2 is immediately missing. Then we must start thinking like, well, maybe humans do not have so big impact. Maybe it is just that we have the CO2 is a function of natural things and not of human things. It is just basically given as this is the CO2 that the nature wants, and it just puts the fluxes in there, including ours, to arrive at that concentrations. But never mind, we don't have. They always say we don't have planet B. So let's remove myself again. We don't have planet B. So what we did experiments, which are, by the way, since the Nuremberg tribunals is considered immoral to do experiments on humans. But that's what they did. They did an experiment on the entire planet, and they reduced the emissions. Now, if you then look at it carefully, this was published in the Economics, Law and Policy in 2021. So we stopped the economy because of the COVID virus, and then had a huge reduction in carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel burning. But if we then look at what it happened, what it caused in the kinetics of the atmosphere, the idea is actually there was no change in the kinetics of the atmosphere. The model that it's 100% natural, the increments of the entire kinetics of the atmosphere, is basically smack on top. You can see the picture here on the right. It's smack on top of the model that it's 100% natural. While the ones that it would be the increments in the atmosphere would be 100% human caused, this is already now starting to have 1 sigma outside the noise level, meaning that it's already, we can start thinking about concluding that it's not humans that are responsible for it. Well, anyway, people there at the Clintel conference workshop in Athens, they were mainly discussing about this point, and there were people in favor of this and against this. To be honest, I'm still undecided, but it is not conclusive. We don't have conclusive evidence that it is humans or not humans that are changing the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, let me now finally go to the core subject of my presentation here, namely the presentation of the paper Residence Time versus Adjustment Time of Carbon Dioxide in the Atmosphere, which was published last year in the Journal of Entropy. Now, the IPCC, they basically, when you read their description, they basically agree that it's a first-order kinetic system. First-order kinetics means that all fluxes are proportional to the concentrations. And moreover, they also, the way they're talking, you could analyze it with a two-box system. And a two-box system means that you have two boxes that are connected, from which you have fluxes from one box to the other, and both boxes are very well mixed so that the concentrations in there are homogeneous. Now, the two boxes then would be the atmosphere and all the sinks, including the oceans and deep oceans, shallow oceans, whatever. You have the other is the sink. So to give you an idea about how they are talking about this, and this I found an alarmist claim somewhere on an alarmist, which called themselves skeptics, if I'm not mistaken. But they wrote, we thus refute the claim of the climate skeptics that individual carbon dioxide molecules have a short lifetime of around 5 years in the atmosphere. However, when they leave the atmosphere, they are simply swapping places with carbon dioxide in the ocean. The final amount of extra CO2 that's injected by humans that remains in the atmosphere stays there on the timescale of centuries. The idea that the IPCC has that the residence time, how long a molecule stays in the atmosphere, is of the order of 4 years. But because when it leaves the atmosphere into the oceans and goes into the oceans throw it back into the atmosphere, and therefore